Let's start with a very interesting Reddit story from joke underscore on underscore you 9719. Boss fired me for being pregnant. I'm the one who gets paid in the end. I posted one of the emails she sent in r/anti-work, and they mentioned I should tell the full story here. To see the photos, click the link below. This last year during COVID had been a tough year for my family. My husband went from 6 figures supporting our family on his salary alone, while we pocketed my entire salary, to losing his job for 8 months. I work in political campaigning, which means I work on short-term contracts as an independent contractor. In other words, if we lose an election, I move on to the next race. I made a pretty good name for myself working on the lower levels of a campaign and moving up quickly. In my state this year, there were statewide elections, and I caught a lucky break and ended up the campaign manager on a statewide race. I am the youngest CM, 24F, to run a statewide race in about the last 20 years. When the primary came up, we lost the election by 200 votes. While we lost the campaign, coming so close to winning and my age made me kind of a superstar in my field. After we lost, I had offers from all over the state for jobs. The problem is, I had just bought a house and wasn't looking to relocate, like you often have to do in politics, or the positions weren't high enough coming off being the top dog, as the higher positions were already filled. I got an offer to join a local campaign, so no relocation, but the salary was lower than what I was used to. I would, however, be the CM again. However, I learned quickly my boss had a holier-than-thou personality. She made several comments about how real women breastfeed and have natural births. I would later be able to do neither, and it really screwed with my emotional well-being. I don't have time to list all the red flags, but I was literally just waiting until my husband got a job to exit. The campaign hadn't been built out at all. There was no one other than the candidate. I ended up building out our entire team, consultant, fundraiser, staff, etc. Luckily, I have made a lot of powerful connections in my time. I signed my contract and sent it in with the salary we had agreed on, with the stipulation that if we raised enough money 3 months down the line, my salary would be raised but could not be lowered at any point. Just a few weeks prior, I had also found out that I was pregnant, and my due date was the week of the election. And just a week after joining the campaign, I was also in a serious car accident. Luckily, my pregnancy was safe, but I herniated a disc in the car accident, and due to my pregnancy, there were very few things that could be done as far as helping my back or pain management. If I did my job right, that shouldn't be an issue, because my job can essentially be handled from home, and staff could do the rest. I had the team working in lockstep, and I was proud of the work I was doing, even though only about 10% of my views aligned with the campaign. Then we hit a snag. The candidate's husband got deployed to a rather dangerous place for a month, and she completely checked out. She stopped fundraising, which means that everything comes to a halt in campaigning. She stopped putting in the legwork to win. We also lost our only lower staff member during this time. We knew she was worried about her husband, so no one on the team tried to push back very hard. Eventually, her husband came back, and it was go time. There wasn't a minute to waste, and I was back to getting our operation working full speed. One day, she calls me up to tell me how 20 years ago, her first job as a private school teacher was making as much money as I was now. I also live in an expensive DC suburb, not the backwoods where she grew up. I have multiple college degrees, and this job offers no benefits unlike teaching. Not comparable at all. This is when I realized there might be a problem. A couple weeks later, I told her I would need to take a step back from doing the other staff member's job, mostly door knocking, because of my injured back, but that we would hire someone. Unfortunately, due to the lack fundraising, it made it hard to pay anyone else, and those duties fell on her. CMs do not typically door knock. We had a team meeting with the entire team, and I started pressuring the candidate about all the things she wasn't doing, and there was a legitimate meltdown. She started yelling at me about how I wasn't doing my job, and my pregnancy wasn't her problem, and how I was the reason everything was failing, and then hung up on the entire team. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. After this, I decided to take a step back from doing all the duties that are typically handled by lower-level staff and just focused on doing my job duties, which weren't being appreciated. I pretty much went radio silent, and she kept nitpicking at everything. Everyone on the campaign started to grow uneasy, but I told them to just hold out. Well, sure enough, she calls me up and says, "Since you are pregnant and can no longer door knock, you can either work for state minimum wage or you can find a new job." Mind you, she knew my husband had been out of work for 8 months and thought I had no options at this point. But what she didn't know is that my husband had gotten a job offer that exact day. So I stopped her right there and thanked her for the opportunity and told her I would be working my contractually obligated 30-day notice at my current salary and then leaving the campaign. She then began to scream at me about how she wasn't paying me a dime more and started listing off a list of issues she had with the way I was doing my job. I stopped her, thanked her once again, and told her all of my finishing tasks would be completed when I received payment for the last month I worked. Yes, she was a month behind on paying me, as well as payment for the 30-day notice that she was legally required to pay me whether I continued working or not. I waited a few hours and she never finalized my termination in writing, so I sent her a termination letter thanking her for the opportunity and once again repeating everything we had discussed on the phone. She sent me a nasty email again reiterating that I wouldn't be paid for the previous month or 30 days and listed about 10 things that I had done to be terminated, including that I didn't wear makeup to work every day. I decided to send this email to the rest of the team, and sure enough, everyone quit except for the consultant. In 5 minutes, she lost everyone she had. Then a friend of mine offered me my dream job working for him, so all in all, it worked out in my favor within 5 minutes of being fired. Well, here where things get tricky. I realized that my contract that obligates her to pay me for the 30 days notice isn't signed, and I'm screwed. Well, sure enough, in her fit of rage, she starts emailing everyone talking badly about me. The only problem is I still have access to the campaign email, and I'm seeing every email she is sending. Emails saying that she wants to keep me on staff, but that I need to take less money, and that I shouldn't have been dishonest about my pregnancy. So clearly I wasn't doing my job that badly. She just wanted to pay a pregnant woman less. She also asks the consultant for a list of things that I did wrong on the campaign so that she will have cause not to pay me my contract. I noticed that the consultant never replies to this email. He tells her that if she wants to fight it, to send him a copy of the contract, and he will have a lawyer take a look at it. Well, sure enough, she sends him a signed copy of the contract, and once again, my contract is valid, and she now has to pay me my severance. She has given me every piece of ammunition I need to get paid at this point, as well as wage a discrimination suit for referencing my pregnancy as a reason for termination. I hire a lawyer. She continues to pester me about turning over all of my work. The thing is, since I'm an independent contractor, I only owe her a final product if I get paid. I reiterate that she isn't getting anything until I've been paid, and she can take it up with my lawyer. She begins slandering me to everyone I know and continuing to send emails about me that I'm just collecting. She then starts calling every friend she has to bully me into giving her what she wants. My response to all of them is, talk to my lawyer. In one final-ditch effort, she has the consultant call me begging me to turn over the stuff. The problem is that the consultant and I are personal friends, and he's really unhappy working for her but has contractual obligations. I tell him to tell her the same thing. Talk to my lawyer. 5 minutes later, I get a call back from him saying that she has fired him because he refused to throw me under the bus and make up excuses for my termination when he believes I was wrongfully terminated. She fires him too, and now he's out of his obligations. He also tells me that the lawyer she sent the contract over to said to pay me. In a matter of 2 weeks, she is once again at square one with no one on her side. She is out of money and struggling. She finally emails me at 11 p.m. that she is willing to pay me. It's nighttime and I don't work for her anymore, so I decide I don't need to respond at that moment. Well, she starts calling me incessantly and texting me, all of which I'm ignoring. By the time I wake up in the morning, I have 20 texts and 5 missed calls. I tell her that I will need to talk to my lawyer at this point, and I'll get back to her after he responds. Well, she goes nuclear. 20 minutes later, I get a call from the police. She is claiming I have been embezzling campaign funds and stealing her data. I have to get my lawyer on the phone and explain the whole situation and why this is a BS claim. I offer the bank account information for the funds she claimed I stole and proved that they were sitting right there in her account. She just doesn't know how to access them, because I'm usually the one who does that. The police officer thinks she is nuts at this point, because she is, but then informs her that it considered larceny to withhold my pay and asks me if I would like to press charges. I say, if she refused to pay, then yes. Within 2 days, I received a check in the mail with my payment, and I turned everything over. The funny thing is that my 30-day notice pay was actually more money than if I had finished out the contract with the reduced pay she wanted to pay me. I got an extra $700 and didn't have to work for her for the remainder of the time. She ended up losing her election in a swing district by 15 points. Edit. For those of you wondering, I left campaigning and will never go back. If you want to hear my thought on politicians, check out the link posted above. I am not proud of my job, nor did I love it. But a girl's got to eat, and good luck finding a company to work in America, for that isn't at the very least morally questionable. Edit 2. Thanks for all the upvotes and awards, guys. I didn't think it would get this much attention. I'm just tired of women being treated like they can't be good employees and moms. On the plus side, more people have upvoted this post than voted for her on election day. The malicious compliance was perfect and was executed brilliantly. OP, despite being wrongfully targeted for pregnancy discrimination, cleverly leveraged her legal rights and remained professional, securing both financial compensation and personal justice. The boss's actions backfired spectacularly, leading to her downfall. The next story from Hippo_Singularity. You want us to violate engineering specs and EPA regulations? That'll be $35,000. One last story about maliciously washing out concrete mixers. I was going to move on to something else, but one of the commenters from last week made me remember this chucklehead. So, I drive concrete mixers, and for those of you who didn't read my last post, or the one before that, concrete washouts and the policies and laws surrounding them are a breeding ground for malicious compliance. Portland cement is nasty, evil stuff. It's about 2/3 calcium oxide, also known as quicklime or caustic lime, which has a pH of 12.8. If it gets on your skin, or in your lungs, it can cause chemical burns. As such, there are serious regulations surrounding the containment of the water used to wash down any equipment used in concrete work. The site operator is ultimately responsible for providing the washout container, whether it is a rented metal bin or purpose-built pit lined with plastic, because the water isn't supposed to touch the dirt. Fines for failure to comply can be $10,000 per incident per day, or more if federal land is involved. Sometimes contractors develop reputations among drivers. This is rarely good because drivers don't chat pleasantly about previous jobs. They bitch. If you end up as the subject of conversation, it's generally because someone is venting about you or warning other drivers. That brings us to scuzz. Dealing with scuzz was like getting attacked by a drop bear. You came away from the encounter with nothing but headache, disbelief, and possibly chlamydia. On my first encounter with him, he decided to randomly pull out his phone and show me the naked pictures his girlfriend had just texted him, and left me with the nagging urge to get the can of Clorox wipes out of my truck and wipe down anything he touched. When it came time to wash out, he told me to go over a couple blocks and use the dirt because it was all Noah's over there and nobody would care. I washed out in a bucket. This was before I learned of the kiddie pool trick, and made sure to pass that helpful information along to the driver bringing the next load, Les. Les looks like the love child of Grace Jones and King Kong Bundy, and has the unconscious ability to fill all available space in the room. The man can loom while kicked back in a lazy boy. He is something of a gentle giant, so depressed Simplex did not get fed through his own pump, but he failed to impress the big man with his antics any more than he had me, and the reputation started to build. So it's a couple years later, and Scuzz's company has hit a big score. They are doing both the grading and concrete for a local resort. By this point, nobody liked working with this company, primarily thanks to Scuzz. On smaller jobs, the senior drivers beg off and toss the rookies under the bus. Unfortunately, this new job is going to be too big for that. But hopefully, we won't have to deal with Scuzz. Putting him in charge of a job like this would be like appointing Thomas Migley Jr. to head the EPA. So, Scuzz is of course chosen as the on-site manager, and there is no way that this will not end in tears. Trouble starts from day one on the concrete pours. There is no washout. Instead, he digs a hole with a backhoe, has the trucks wash out into the hole, then buries it. This is incredibly illegal, but for the driver's parts, there aren't too many other options. It's the height of summer, and nobody is going to even attempt to wash out into a bucket, which involves climbing a ladder with a 20 to 30 pound bucket several times in 115-degree heat. We don't have time to do that with the required yardage anyways. Things come to a head halfway into the project. It's blisteringly hot outside, and Scuzz has vastly overestimated his crew's ability to work in the heat. Trucks are stacked up on the job for hours before pouring. The loads should be rejected, and probably would be if the inspector were on site. Scuzz doesn't want to reject the loads, however, because that's going to reflect very badly on him. Each rejected truck will cost the company about $1,000. So he instructs drivers to add water to 3-hour-old concrete. Normally, you are not supposed to add water after the 90-minute mark, when the concrete has started to set. In that heat, the cutoff should probably have been closer to 60, and has the crews pour it. I had the second to last load on the job, so my concrete was 4 hours old, and I've already added over 100 gallons to try to keep it wet enough to pour. That is way past the allowable amount, which is usually closer to 10 to 30 gallons, and most of it was added past time. The concrete is so far gone that it's hardening as it slides down my chute. They have to get a couple guys with shovels to keep it moving. When I finish up, I ask where to wash out, and Scuzz points over to the trench we were using. The trench that is currently being filled in by the backhoe. So instead, Scuzz tells me to drive down to the low point on the site, a huge pit about 20 feet below grade, and wash out there. He'll have it scraped up with a skip loader later. Scuzz is not aware that the reason the backhoe was so furiously filling the trench was because the city inspector had just rolled up on site. In fact, he's standing on the edge pit looking down at me. I decide I have had enough of Scuzz. I look the inspector in the eye, stick my shovel in the chute, and, without breaking eye contact, slowly drag a small pile of concrete down onto the dirt. As it plops into the dirt like a corrosive cowpat, the inspector jumps into his truck and comes tearing down the ramp like Moses coming down the mountain, and he looks about ready to break a stone tablet over my head. Honestly, I'm not too worried. While technically I could be in serious trouble, what is on the ground is already dry and can easily be shoveled back into my chute. Unless the inspector goes on a complete power trip, the worst I am looking at is a dressing down. The inspector jumps out of his truck and starts swearing at me, asking what the hell I think I'm doing and threatening me with any number of environmental regulations. I kick the lump of concrete and it rolls. Then, with all the sincere and heartfelt feigned innocence I can muster, I explain that my contractor told me to clean out there as they did not currently have a washout on site. The inspector narrows his eyes and asks who my contractor is. I tell him, and the inspector starts swearing some more. Jackpot. As much as they are the enemy, and to be obstructed, mislead and stymied at every opportunity, inspectors are not stupid. They know exactly what kind of game Scuzz has been playing on the job site, and they have warned him more than once. The inspector looks at the muck in my chute and pokes it with a finger. It's hard and well over 100 degrees. Concrete heats up as it sets. He asks if I have a hammer. I do. He tells me to knock out as much as possible and try to use as little water as I can. He then drives back up the ramp, looking to unleash some holy wrath on Scuzz. The inspector doesn't find Scuzz, who heard the inspector yelling at me and is currently cowering on the far side of the backhoe. Instead, he finds Jake. Jake had the last load on the job, and they didn't use all his concrete. Jake has also been in the industry for 30 years and knows exactly what that concrete will do to his drum. Jake is standing in front of the very large pile of concrete he spun out onto the ground and is filling his drum with the water truck's fire hose. With luck, by the time he reaches the plant, all that water will hopefully have loosened up the crap stuck to the inside of his drum. The inspector doesn't even look at the pile. He just asks, "Where is he?" And Jake helpfully points out where Scuzz is hiding. When I finally leave, about 45 minutes later, Scuzz is in the skip loader, trying to break up Jake's giant pile of leftovers. The inspector has finally run out of breath and stopped yelling. But so long he is there, he decides he might as well check the concrete tickets. It's not technically his job, but he knows what is and isn't permitted. As I pass his truck, he is pouring through the tickets, and he's grinning. There is nothing cheerful or comforting in this grin. A crocodile would think it was a bit predatory. The last half-dozen concrete tickets all show more than the allowable water. A few more show that the concrete was poured after the load was expired. Jake's and mine both helpfully include timestamps showing that water was added after the load expired. The waves of schadenfreude are almost visibly emanating from the inspector's body. The inspector not only hit the company with 2 separate violations, one for each truck, he went for the maximum fine, since there had been prior warnings and the violations had been willful. On top of that, he gave the general contractor a heads up about the expired loads and overuse of water. So, in addition to the EPA fines, Scuzz's boss had to rip out and replace 150 yards of concrete. We never saw Scuzz again. TLDR. A problem contractor with a bad reputation grossly mismanages his site and tells me to wash out onto the ground. I start to do so in full view of an inspector and throw the contractor under the bus. Contractor gets slapped with $20,000 in fines and $15,000 in repairs. The malicious compliance was absolutely perfect, and it was executed strategically. OP saw a chance to hold Scuzz accountable for his blatant disregard of regulations, and by washing out in front of the inspector, he ensured the contractor faced major financial and legal consequences.